In this blog today, I will focus on coming out of a cult with a spouse. And I will also think about what it might be like coming out of a cult, but your spouse is still in the cult that you left. When we got kicked out, we were both in a place where we knew something wasn't right. Actually, we knew that things were very much not right, but we could not put our finger on what it was. It didn't feel right. I often thought there was just no love. There was only kind of a worship of the leadership, and they don't care how our lives are, if they're falling apart, if we're having difficulties. They just don't take any responsibility for the things that go bad. They only take the credit when things go well. We only seriously talked about leaving because I had a dream where I felt like God was saying, it's time to go. And I shared that with my husband shortly after we got married. And before I even said anything, he mentioned that he doesn't feel that welcome in Germany anymore. So we started to put that together and really fearfully pray. We were accused later, when people still talked to us after we got kicked out, that we didn't have the fear of God and we wanted to leave anyway. But the truth is, we wanted it to work very much. And we wanted to do what God wanted us to do, and we believed that being part of that group was what we were supposed to do, but we suffered. We felt so out of sorts that something had to happen. When we got kicked out, when we got this phone call, actually my husband got the phone call when I was the one that the leader, knew much longer. We did not know if we should cry or laugh. Suddenly the world felt so huge and scary, and all the freedom, the opportunity, we had no idea what to do with it. I think they wanted us to come right back, which is why they pulled the rug under us, but that did not happen. One of the first things we did was we called my parents, and unfortunately we were not able to admit over the phone that we are not in that group anymore. So there was a lot of fear, shame, and confusion, also pride to admit that. But I couldn't say that over the telephone. And because my parents still thought that I was still steeped into all that arrogance and legalism, which had really hurt our broader family quite a bit, they didn't want us to come home that weekend. So we had to figure it out amongst each other, and it felt a little bit like the ceiling was gonna fall on us. I want to share with you the things we had to do in order to save our marriage, in order to have a healthy marriage and get better. One of the first things that happened was that we took some time to pray. My husband went into one room, I went into the other, and then we took a Bible each, and when we met back, we shared about what we kind of were reading, what we felt led to talk about, to think about with God. And we both ended up in Matthew 21, and in that chapter, Jesus gets asked by the Pharisees, it's kind of a trick question, on whose authority are you doing all the things that you do? And then Jesus says to them, well, when you tell me on whose authority John the Baptist did what he did, I will tell you on whose authority I am doing what I'm doing. And so the Pharisees had to think amongst themselves, and they decided to be very diplomatic. They decided to say, we don't know, because if we say yes, John the Baptist was from God, they would have to explain to the people why they didn't follow him. And if they would say no, they would have to have all those people be pretty upset with them because they believed that John the Baptist was from God. So they opted out by saying, I don't know. And Jesus said, well, I'm not going to tell you either. So my husband and I, we were left with that question. Do we believe that this group that I had been with for 3 years was something that was from God? And he said as honestly as he could, yes, he believed it was from God, where I said as honestly as I could, I can't believe it is from God because it caused so much hurt. And that question stayed with us for all the years to come. It's been 9 years almost that we've been kicked out and we haven't looked back. But we needed to wrestle with that. There's a priest, a Franciscan priest called Richard Rohr, and I enjoy very much listening to him on YouTube. He talks a lot about how our Western mind is very dualistic. We only think in yes or no, or right and wrong, or black and white. We also think us and them. And this dualistic thinking doesn't help us. It doesn't lead us into a loving way of thinking. And furthermore, it restricts us from actually asking God, what is your perspective? Because we just assume, well, God's on my side, right? He's against them and he's on my side. Well, what I realized is that it's not as easy to say that this group is not from God. You know what? I don't even have to decide that. I can very honestly say, I don't know. I can clearly say, though, that it wasn't for me. It wasn't for me because my life got turned upside down. I got so out of sorts with myself, with God, that I didn't know what was right and wrong anymore. I had severe anxiety and fear a lot, and just many, many confusing questions where there was no answers. And those are all signs to tell you it was not a good fit for me. And that is just the truth. And I feel like if someone left a group or got kicked out, but the spouse is still in that group, that is an important thing to come to terms with, that there might be abuse in the group, but for some reason or another, there's still something there for another person. They're still getting something out of it. It still works for them. They would not say it's not from God. They would say it is from God. And so this is a very difficult thing we have to wrestle with when a spouse is not with us in freedom. Or maybe your spouse left your group and you're wondering, what the heck? Did he turn away from God? Well, in my husband's and my case, I ended up, when we came to America, join a home church with my mother-in-law, and those people were very, very good for me. They helped me learn discernment, and they helped me work through the trauma of the experiences, and they were really instrumental to me getting to a good place. So I trust these people. But my husband did not join the group with his own mother, and that has caused some tension. But to me, I can now very simply say it's apparently not for him, and that's fine. It works good for me, but he would not find his home in there. And so when it comes to our faith, we're working on being on the same page. But here's another thing that has helped me tremendously to find peace in our relationship. And again, it comes down to this dualistic thinking. My husband is not a villain, or he's with me just because he agrees with me or he doesn't agree with me. He's a multi-layered human being. In the very early times when we got out of the group and we lived together, we had just gotten married, we would hurt each other very, very significantly by calling each other by our spirits, you know? Like he might say to me, oh, that's such a poverty spirit that you have. Or I would say, oh, that's such a religious spirit that you have there, or whatnot. You can imagine it. We would just, rather than dealing with each other as human beings that chose to spend the rest of our lives together, we were using the techniques of the group, which is to dominate another person by just, rather than treating them like a human being, to just treat them like a spirit, you know? So, like, don't talk to me unless you figure that spirit out. Just get rid of that spirit and then we can talk again. That's not okay to talk to your spouse like that. And it's not okay to talk to anyone like that. That's not a way that you help another person. Sure, it can be fine to say to a person, you know what? There might be a fear that is underlying in your attitude right now. Can we take a look at it, you know? It's very different when you try to help someone, making them feel like you are in their corner, not that you're their judge and they have to become worthy of you talking to them. They have to be perfect so that you can treat them with love. That's a major thing that my husband and I had to learn, that we were humans and we chose each other, and to lead a happy life together, we needed to keep that in mind and get rid of all this religious stuff that really just hurts and causes a greater chasm between people. Another thing that was instrumental for us was to leave, well, I would say religiosity behind. I remember my group was so big about certain prayers. You know, you have to start your day with certain prayers. I remember I had a friend in the group, and when she would be in the car driving, realizing I forgot to pray my driving blessing and binding and loosening of protection and whatnot, she would have almost a heart attack, and that could have easily caused an accident, which thankfully, to my knowledge, she did not have any accidents with a car. But you see this religiosity that where God is someone that needs to be pleased so that he loves you and that he protects you, you know, so you have to follow this formula in order to really hold up your end of the bargain, your end of the covenant, rather than realizing we've been set free for freedom. Truth will set us free, and from there we choose this relationship with God, and we can know he loves us. You know, he's waiting for us to always to like, oh, what's your perspective? You know, I believe God is life and love, and so that's how I now measure whatever it is that I want to do for him. Is it life affirming? Is it loving? Once I read the book, The Subtle Power of Spiritual Abuse, I started to talk about that I'm a victim, that I was a victim of spiritual abuse, and that at some point my husband really admitted to that. It made him mad that I would call myself a victim, because he considered himself a victim of me. And I had to face that too, that I was hurt by the group and I passed it on to him. That is just the sad truth. And I needed to recognize that, admit that, and ask for forgiveness, which I did, but I also stood my ground as a victim, saying I didn't have a choice. The way I received them, for all the reasons that I joined them, which is the topic of another video blog, I followed orders, I was obedient, and I thought I was obedient to God with the things that I did to him. And those are not small matters. One of the examples is that we forced baptized him in November night in Germany. It was incredibly cold, and then there was this long prayer going on. So my husband got physical abuse on top of all the spiritual abuse that God dished out through me, but also from the leaders directly to him. Those dynamics that get developed within a group, they are so important to reflect on and then find your peace with each other. It wasn't your intention to hurt one another. You did what you thought was the right thing at the moment. We can call that insanity, or we can call that under the spell of spiritual abuse. And obviously the fruit is not going to be good. Another problem that my husband and I needed to seriously consider was that my group strongly taught that the man is the head of the household. The man is the one that says what goes and doesn't go, and the woman is kind of just in for the ride, along for it, stays at home, and if she doesn't have kids, something's wrong with her. So obviously that posed a little bit of a problem when we got married and lived on our own. My husband and I discerned for ourselves that we just want to be best friends. We're shoulder to shoulder partners. And what else can I say about that? That's what we determined to be the truth. And if someone believes they need to feel inferior in front of God because they're female, if that helps you, okay, go ahead. But that's just not where we're at, and I guess I could give you a Bible verse to go along with this, but I think this is something that you need to feel your way through. Are you less capable to hear God because of your gender? Yeah, that's all I have to say on that. When we got kicked out shortly before, we got sent a text message with a Bible verse, and that was the curse of Deuteronomy 28. Because they decided we're disobedient, so we are under the terrible curse of, nothing's ever going to work out in our lives. And we had to decide that either we receive that or we don't receive that. And we decided to not receive that curse. And we didn't send it back to the sender. We send it back to the lie where it came from. Nobody. Just let it be. Let that curse be gone. I want love to come out of my life, not more hurt, more hate, more fear and suffering. There's enough already of that. The main points that we had to figure out was we needed to reject curses that we were given. We needed to be on the same page as to who did what and for what reason, who was the victim, who was the abuser. We needed to be okay with not knowing, was this from God or wasn't it? But we both could say very clearly it wasn't for us. And just to repeat that, if your spouse is still in a group or they have left and you're in it, keep in mind that you have to do what you have to do. What good does it do if your group can speak in the tongues of angels and prophesy till the cows come home, but they are not feeling loved? What good does it do? It won't do any good. So let them leave or let them stay, whatever they need to do in order to feel that they have made a choice out of freedom. That's what God has given us, freedom, not a new prison. Another point I'd like to make in regards to what if your spouse is still in a legalistic group but you have left? You get to protect yourself. If you have left, you have had your reasons, you are free to leave. God loves you, you still will go to heaven. Don't worry about any of that. If there are children involved and the children are being dragged into a legalistic group where it's very likely they will get hurt eventually, or they get a very skewed picture of who God is and what God wants from us, I would say stand your ground and do what you need to do to protect your children. And do what you need to do to protect your children. And do what you need to do to protect your children. I've heard stories about babies not being allowed to wear tights in the winter because girls or women don't wear pants or pantyhose, only dresses, which is obviously ridiculous and is child abuse. So whatever your reason is that your family is split up, it is what it is right now, but protect your children. And in that same sense, protect yourself. The laws that might be applicable to your spouse, they might not apply to you. But if you're under the law of freedom, I can only imagine how difficult that tension would be. And honestly, I personally don't have much experience with that. I would just say, this is not a matter of someone having a weaker faith and their faith in God is being risked by your freedom, like we read in Corinthians, but this is a matter of someone believing that you only go to heaven when you do these things, or God is mad with you when you do these things. So it's not about them believing in God or not based on your being free. To them, you are the problem because you're not obeying to what they think you ought to do to please God. But honestly, that is not your job. And you're not under that yoke unless you receive that. And to that, I want to encourage you and say you are free. You're set free. Now, don't use that freedom to hurt yourself. I think that's the point of that statement. Do what you need to do to be okay. Do what you need to do in order to thrive. Those were my 2 cents on what life was like after we got out of our cult and how we got better. If there's any topics you'd like me to cover, just leave me a comment and I'd be happy to share other 2 cents that I have lying around somewhere with you on that. Be blessed abundantly.